The stench of grease and desperation clung to my uniform like a second skin. I'd scrubbed tables at Rosie's Diner for 3 years, my hands perpetually raw from bleach and hot water, my feet aching in shoes held together with duct tape. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed incessantly, a soundtrack to my exhaustion as I wiped down the sticky counter for what felt like the 1,000th time that shift. Chicago's South Side pressed against the diner's grimy windows, all cracked pavement and boarded storefronts. This neighborhood swallowed hope whole and spit out the bones. I'd watched it happen to too many people. I refused to let it happen to me, though some days the refusal felt more like stubborn denial than actual hope. The bell above the door chimed. I didn't look up immediately, too focused on a particularly stubborn coffee stain. My reflection in the polished steel napkin dispenser caught my eye. Dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, circles under my green eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. The hollow cheeks of someone who skipped too many meals to make rent. 23 years old, and already so tired. Diana Carter? The voice made me freeze. Deep, controlled, with an edge that suggested violence held barely in check. I knew that tone. Everyone in this neighborhood knew that tone. It belonged to men who didn't ask twice. I turned slowly, the dish rag still clutched in my hand like a pathetic weapon. 3 men stood inside the diner. The 2 flanking the door were clearly muscle, broad shoulders, dead eyes, hands resting casually near their jackets in a way that screamed concealed weapons. But it was the man in the center who made my breath catch. Tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from marble. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that looked like it had never relaxed, and eyes the color of slate. Cold, calculating, utterly merciless. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than I made in 6 months, tailored to perfection over what was clearly a powerful build. This was Damian Blackwood. Everyone knew who he was, even if most pretended not to. The youngest head of a crime family Chicago had seen in decades. Ruthless enough to consolidate power before his 30th birthday. Smart enough to keep the cops perpetually 1 step behind. And he was standing in my diner, saying my name. Yes? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Small victory. We need to talk, privately. Not a request. My stomach dropped. About what? His expression didn't change, but something flickered in those slate eyes. Impatience, maybe. Or the kind of irritation that preceded very bad things happening to people who wasted his time. About your brother. The dish rag slipped from my fingers. Dylan. God, what had Dylan done now? My younger brother had always been trouble, but lately he'd graduated from petty theft and bar fights to something darker. He'd stopped coming by my apartment 3 weeks ago, stopped answering my calls. I'd been worried sick, but a small, guilty part of me had also been relieved. Dylan's chaos had a way of spreading, of pulling me under with him. I don't know where he is, I said quickly. We're not close. I haven't seen him in weeks. I know. Damian's voice remained perfectly calm. He stole from me, a substantial shipment, worth approximately $2 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. 2 million. Dylan, you absolute idiot. I don't have that kind of money. I can barely make rent. Whatever he took, I can't. I'm not here for money, Miss Carter. The way he said it made goosebumps rise on my arms. If not money, then what? The unspoken threat hung in the air between us, heavy as smoke. Then what do you want? He stepped closer. I wanted to back away, but pride kept me rooted in place. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing my fear, even though my heart hammered against my ribs hard enough to bruise. Your brother made a deal, Damian said. His life for yours. Specifically, his life for your hand in marriage. The words didn't make sense at first. I heard them, but my brain refused to process their meaning. Marriage? To Damien Blackwood? That couldn't be what he was saying. That's insane. Dylan can't just... He wouldn't. He did. 2 days ago, when my men found him in a warehouse on the docks, he offered the only thing he thought I might accept in exchange for his miserable life. Damien's gaze swept over me, clinical and assessing. You! Rage flared hot in my chest, momentarily overwhelming the fear. I'm not property. He can't just trade me like... Your brother seemed to think otherwise. And frankly, Miss Carter, your opinion on the matter is irrelevant. His tone remained conversational, as if we were discussing the weather rather than my future being decided without my consent. The wedding is scheduled for Saturday, 3 days from now. My people will provide everything you need: dress, documentation, transportation. All you need to do is show up and say the words. And if I refuse? The question came out barely above a whisper. Damien's smile didn't reach his eyes. Then I go back to my original plan for your brother. He has until the end of the month. I'll send pieces of him to your apartment, 1 per day, until there's nothing left. Then I'll burn down this diner with everyone inside. Then I'll find every person you've ever spoken to kindly and make sure they understand the consequences of association with thieves. The casual brutality of it stole my breath. He meant every word. I could see it in those cold slate eyes, in the set of his jaw, in the absolute certainty of his posture. Damien Blackwood didn't make idle threats. Why? My voice cracked. Why would you even want this? You could have anyone. I could, he agreed. But this isn't about desire, Miss Carter. It's about sending a message. No one steals from me. No one betrays me. And the consequences of such actions extend to everything and everyone the transgressor holds dear. Your brother loves you, in his pathetic way. This punishment is specifically designed to hurt him in ways that simply killing him would not. So I was to be both bride and revenge. A living reminder of Dylan's failure, his weakness, his inability to protect the one person he actually cared about. I need time to think, I said desperately. You have until Saturday. Use the time to prepare yourself. The wedding will be traditional, at least in appearance. My family expects certain proprieties. He turned toward the door, his men falling into step behind him. Oh, and Miss Carter, don't run. I have people watching you. If you try to leave the city, I'll know within minutes, and the deal will be off. Your brother dies. Messily. They left as suddenly as they'd arrived, the bell chiming cheerfully as the door swung shut. I stood frozen behind the counter, my whole world tilting on its axis. The diner's owner, Sal, emerged from the kitchen where he'd been conspicuously absent during the entire exchange. His weathered face was pale, his hands shaking slightly as he lit a cigarette despite the no-smoking policy he usually enforced. Diana, he started, then seemed at a loss for words. I need the rest of the day off, I heard myself say. My voice sounded distant, disconnected from my body. Take the rest of the week. Hell, take whatever you need. Sal's eyes were sad, knowing. He'd grown up in this neighborhood. He understood exactly what Damien Blackwood's interest meant. I'm sorry, kid. I'm so sorry. I didn't remember the walk home. One moment I was untying my apron with numb fingers. The next I was fumbling with my apartment key, hands shaking so badly it took 3 tries to fit it in the lock. My apartment was a studio barely large enough for a twin bed, a kitchenette, and a bathroom where you could sit on the toilet and wash your hands in the sink simultaneously. The only window overlooked a brick wall. It was depressing and cramped, and the radiator clanked all night during winter. It was mine. I sank onto the bed, the ancient springs creaking in protest. For a long moment, I just sat there, staring at nothing, trying to wrap my mind around what had just happened. Saturday. 3 days. I had 3 days before I became Damien Blackwood's wife. The hysterical urge to laugh bubbled up in my throat. I dreamed of marriage as a little girl, like most kids did. White dress, flowers, someone who looked at me like I hung the moon. The fairy tale. This was the nightmare version. A forced wedding to a mobster who saw me as nothing more than a tool for revenge against my brother. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello? Diana. Dylan's voice, rough with tears. Diana, I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. I didn't know what else to do. They were going to kill me. They were going to... Stop. I cut him off, surprised by the coldness in my own voice. Just stop. I'll fix this. I swear I'll find a way to fix this. I'll get the drugs back, There is no fixing this, Dylan. You made a deal with the devil and you used me as currency. The words tasted bitter. $2 million. What were you thinking? I was desperate. I owed people money, and this shipment was just sitting there, and I thought, you didn't think. You never think. I closed my eyes, exhaustion and anger and fear all warring for dominance. Where are you? What safe house? Blackwood's men have me locked up until the wedding, making sure I don't run, I guess. Diana, please. You have to believe me. I don't have to believe anything. My voice cracked. You sold me to save yourself. That's the truth. That's all that matters. I love you. You're all I have. I couldn't let them... Goodbye, Dylan. I ended the call and turned off my phone. Silence pressed in from all sides, thick and suffocating. Saturday. The word echoed in my mind like a death knell. I had 3 days to prepare myself for a future I'd never chosen, beside a man who terrified me, all to save a brother who'd proven he valued his own life more than my freedom. The tears came finally, hot and angry and helpless. I curled onto my side on the narrow bed and let them fall. Let the grief and rage pour out until I had nothing left. When I finally sat up, eyes swollen and throat raw, something had shifted inside me. The despair remained, but beneath it grew something harder, sharper. If I was going to be forced into this, I wouldn't go as a victim. I'd walk down that aisle with my head high. I'd say the words without shaking. I'd look Damian Blackwood in those cold slate eyes and I'd survive this. Whatever came after, I'd survive that too. I had no other choice. The next morning, a knock on my door startled me awake. I'd barely slept, drifting in and out of anxious half-dreams, where I walked down endless aisles toward altars that receded with every step. Through the peephole, I saw a woman, mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal pantsuit. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her expression professionally neutral. Miss Carter? I'm Elena Volkov. Mr. Blackwood sent me to assist with preparations for Saturday. Of course he did. Damian Blackwood seemed like the type who controlled every detail, who left nothing to chance. I opened the door. Elena's sharp eyes swept over my rumpled clothes. I'd fallen asleep in my diner uniform, and my cramped studio with the efficiency of someone cataloging weaknesses. We have a great deal to accomplish in a short time, she said, stepping inside without invitation. Mr. Blackwood has arranged for your belongings to be moved to his residence after the ceremony. For now, we need to address immediate concerns: your dress, documentation, and basic etiquette. Etiquette? The word came out more sharply than intended. Elena's expression didn't change. Mr. Blackwood's family is traditional in certain respects. As his wife, you'll be expected to maintain certain standards of behavior and appearance. I'm here to ensure you understand those expectations. Wife. The word felt foreign, wrong. I wasn't anyone's wife. I was Diana Carter, waitress, survivor, barely making it from one paycheck to the next. This elegant woman with her expensive clothes and cool demeanor existed in a different world entirely. What if I don't want to meet his expectations? I asked, knowing how childish it sounded even as the words left my mouth. then you'll make his life difficult, and he'll make yours exponentially more so. I've worked for the Blackwood family for 15 years, Miss Carter. I've seen how this ends for people who insist on unnecessary resistance. Elena pulled out a tablet, swiping through what appeared to be a detailed schedule. Now, we have an appointment at a boutique in an hour for your dress fitting. After that, you'll meet with the family attorney to review and sign the marriage contract. Contract? My stomach nodded. A prenuptial agreement among other documents. Standard procedure. She glanced up, something almost resembling sympathy flickering in her eyes. I understand this situation is not ideal, Miss Carter. But Mr. Blackwood is not an unreasonable man, provided his expectations are met. You'll find your life considerably easier if you simply comply. Comply. Such a clinical word for what amounted to complete capitulation. And if I have expectations of my own? The question surprised even me. Elena actually smiled at that, though it didn't reach her eyes. Then I suggest you negotiate them before Saturday. After the wedding, your bargaining position becomes significantly weaker. She was right, of course. Whatever small amount of leverage I possessed existed only in these 3 days before I said I do. Once those words were spoken, I'd be bound, legally and practically, to a man who could make problems disappear with a phone call. Fine, I said, reaching for the jacket I'd thrown over my chair. Let's get this over with. The boutique was in a part of Chicago I'd only seen from bus windows. Gleaming storefronts, pristine sidewalks, people who'd never worried about making rent in their entire lives. Elena's black Mercedes glided to a stop outside a shop with no visible sign, just an elegant number on the door. Inside, an older woman with silver hair and measuring tape draped around her neck greeted us like we were royalty. "Ah, Miss Carter, we've been expecting you. I'm Madame Rousseau. Mr. Blackwood provided very specific instructions regarding your gown." Of course he had. For the next 2 hours I was poked, prodded, measured, and dressed in various samples while Madame Rousseau and her assistants murmured in French. The actual wedding dress, when they finally brought it out, stole what little breath I had left. It was stunning. Ivory silk that seemed to glow in the boutique's soft lighting, with delicate lace detailing on the bodice and sleeves. The design was elegant without being ostentatious, traditional but with modern touches. A long veil completed the ensemble. The sheer fabric embroidered with tiny flowers so intricate they must have taken weeks to complete. It was the kind of dress every little girl dreamed of wearing. And I was going to wear it to a wedding I'd been forced into, marrying a man who saw me as a punishment for my brother's sins. "It's beautiful," I whispered, because it was true, despite everything. Madame Rousseau beamed. "Mr. Blackwood has exquisite taste. And you, mademoiselle, will be a vision, a spectacle, a living symbol of Damien Blackwood's power and reach." The veil was particularly elaborate, heavy enough that I'd need help managing it. Madame Rousseau explained that it would be lowered over my face at the beginning of the ceremony, traditional style, then lifted by Damien before we exchanged vows. "The moment the veil is lifted is very significant," she said, adjusting the fabric. "It represents the groom seeing his bride's true face, accepting her as she is." The irony wasn't lost on me. Damien had already seen my face. He knew exactly what he was getting, a reluctant bride forced into compliance through threats against her brother. After the boutique came the attorney's office, another pristine space in another expensive building. The lawyer, a man named Harrison who spoke in careful, measured tones, presented me with a stack of documents. "This is a standard prenuptial agreement," he explained, though nothing about my situation felt standard. "It outlines the terms of the marriage, including financial arrangements, expectations regarding behavior and loyalty, and consequences for breach of contract." I skimmed the pages, my head spinning. There were clauses about public appearances, restrictions on travel, requirements to attend certain family functions. One section detailed how I was expected to dress, behave, even who I could associate with. "This isn't a marriage contract," I said flatly. "It's a prison sentence." Harrison had the grace to look uncomfortable. "Mr. Blackwood's position requires certain securities. These provisions protect both parties." "How exactly do they protect me?" "You'll have access to substantial financial resources, security, a place to live, in exchange for my freedom." I pushed the papers away. "What happens if I refuse to sign?" The attorney's expression turned pitying. "Miss Carter, you should understand that you're signing these documents regardless. The only question is whether you do so now, in a civilized manner, or whether Mr. Blackwood employs more persuasive methods. I strongly advise the former." Of course, nothing was actually a choice. Everything was framed as option when really there was only one path, the one Damien had already decided I would take. I signed. Every page, every clause, every restriction on my future. My hand shook, but I kept my expression blank. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing how thoroughly beaten down I felt. That evening, Elena deposited me back at my apartment with instructions to pack only personal items of sentimental value. "Everything else will be provided," she said. "Mr. Blackwood prefers you begin fresh." The translation was clear. He was erasing Diana Carter, waitress, and creating Diana Blackwood, trophy wife. I packed slowly, each item I placed in the single duffel bag feeling like a small rebellion. Photos of my parents, dead since I was 19, leaving Dylan and me alone. A worn copy of Jane Eyre my mother had given me. A necklace with a small silver compass pendant, my father's last gift before the accident. These things were mine. Damien Blackwood's money couldn't buy them, couldn't replace them. My phone rang. Different unknown number this time. "Hello? Miss Carter." Damien's voice sent a shiver down my spine. "I trust Elena has been helpful." "Very efficient," I said carefully. "Good. I'm calling to inform you that you'll stay at my residence tomorrow night. It's customary for the bride to be at the wedding venue the night before, and the ceremony will take place in my home's private chapel." "I'd prefer to stay here." The words came out more forcefully than I intended. Silence on the other end. I could practically feel his displeasure radiating through the phone line. "That wasn't a request, Miss Carter. My men will collect you tomorrow at 6 in the evening. Be ready." "Why tomorrow? The wedding isn't until Saturday." "Because I want you where I can see you. Where I know you won't do anything foolish like attempting to run." His tone softened fractionally. "The accommodations will be comfortable. You'll have your own suite. Privacy when you want it. Consider it an opportunity to adjust to your new circumstances before the wedding." An opportunity. He had a gift for making cages sound like luxuries. "Fine," I said, because what else could I say? "Diana." The use of my first name startled me. "I know this isn't what you would have chosen, but fighting me at every turn will only make things harder for both of us. I'm not your enemy." "Then what are you?" Another pause. "Your husband. In 2 days, that will be our reality. I suggest you make peace with it." He ended the call before I could respond. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, surrounded by the few belongings I could call my own, and tried to imagine what life would be like as Damien Blackwood's wife. The images that came were all shadows and sharp edges, beautiful on the surface but dangerous beneath. Like the wedding dress, exquisite and suffocating in equal measure. Tomorrow I would enter his world. Saturday I would be bound to it forever. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, I needed to understand my captor if I had any hope of surviving this with some fragment of myself intact. Part 3. The night before, the car that came for me wasn't the Mercedes Elena had driven. It was a Bentley, black and gleaming, worth more than I'd earn in 10 lifetimes. The driver was one of the men who'd accompanied Damien to the diner, silent, efficient, with eyes that missed nothing. We drove north, away from my neighborhood's comfortable squalor, through streets that grew progressively cleaner, wider, more expensive. The homes transformed from crumbling brownstones to elegant row houses, to eventually standalone mansions set back from the road behind iron gates and manicured lawns. Damien's estate was at the end of a private drive, hidden from the street by ancient oak trees. The house itself was a study in understated wealth, stone and glass, modern lines softened by traditional architecture, somehow managing to be both imposing and inviting. Lights glowed warm in the windows, giving the illusion of home rather than fortress. But I saw the cameras, the strategic positioning of the walls, the way every approach was visible from multiple angles. This was a castle, designed to keep people out, or possibly to keep people in. The driver opened my door. I stepped out, clutching my duffel bag like a lifeline. "Miss Carter." A new voice. I turned to find a man in his 60s, impeccably dressed in a dark suit, with silver hair and kind eyes. "I'm Thomas, Mr. Blackwood's head of household. Welcome. Please, come inside." He took my bag with practiced ease and led me through the front door into an entrance hall that took my breath away. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, art on the walls that probably belonged in museums. Everything was pristine, expensive, carefully curated. "Mr. Blackwood is concluding a business call," Thomas said, guiding me down a hallway. "He asked that you make yourself comfortable in your suite. He'll join you for dinner in an hour." My suite turned out to be 3 rooms. A bedroom larger than my entire apartment. A sitting area with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking gardens I could barely see in the gathering dusk. And a bathroom that was pure luxury. The bed was enormous, covered in silk sheets that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Fresh flowers sat on the dresser, filling the air with the scent of roses and lilies. It was beautiful. It was a cage. I stood at the window, watching lights come on across the grounds, trying to spot the guards I knew must be patrolling. Damien wouldn't leave security to chance. A knock at the door. My pulse jumped. "Come in," I called, turning. But it wasn't Thomas or Elena. It was Damien himself, changed from the suit he'd worn to the diner into more casual clothes. Dark slacks, a black shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle. He looked less like a mobster, and more like someone who could have passed for a businessman, until you saw his eyes. Those slate-gray eyes that missed nothing. "Diana." He stayed by the door, as if giving me space to breathe. "I wanted to check that you're settling in." "It's lovely," I said, meaning it despite myself. "Very. Comfortable. But still a prison?" His tone was wry. I met his gaze steadily. "If I tried to walk out that front door right now, what would happen?" "You'd be stopped. No hesitation, no apology. Not harshly, but you wouldn't make it past the gate. Then yes, still a prison." He stepped further into the room, his movements controlled and predatory. Not threatening exactly, but reminding me constantly of the leashed power in his frame. "I meant what I said on the phone. I'm not your enemy, Diana." "Then why am I here? Why force this?" I gestured vaguely at the situation, the suite, the whole surreal circumstance. "You could have just killed Dylan. You didn't need to drag me into it." Something flickered across his face, too quick for me to read. "Your brother's debt to me extends beyond money. He humiliated me, stole from me in front of people who watch for any sign of weakness. If I simply kill him, I look reactive, emotional. But this..." He moved to stand near the window, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. "This demonstrates control, power, the ability to extract consequences that extend far beyond the immediate transgressor. So I'm a statement. The words tasted bitter. You're a solution to a complex problem. He turned to face me fully. And perhaps, given time, more than that. The intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. What was that supposed to mean? I don't understand you, I said quietly. One moment you're threatening to send my brother to me in pieces, the next you're talking about making me comfortable. Which is the real Damian Blackwood? Both. His answer was immediate. I'm capable of extreme violence when necessary. I'm also capable of kindness when it serves my purposes. You're going to be my wife, Diana. That means something to me, even if the circumstances are less than ideal. What does it mean? I challenged. What do you want from me, really? He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with that unnerving intensity. I want loyalty, he finally said. Respect. A partner who understands the world I operate in and doesn't flinch from it. Someone I can trust at my side. You want the impossible. You can't force trust. No, he agreed. But I can create the conditions for it to develop. The question is whether you're willing to give it a chance. I wanted to say no, to throw his words back in his face, to tell him that trust couldn't coexist with coercion. But standing there, watching shadows play across his features, I saw something I hadn't expected. Loneliness. Damian Blackwood, powerful and feared, surrounded by an empire he'd built through ruthlessness, was lonely. The realization didn't make me forgive him or accept my situation, but it made him marginally more human, more complicated than the simple monster I wanted him to be. I need time, I said. More than 3 days. You have a lifetime. His voice softened. I'm not expecting you to fall into this role immediately, Diana. Just try. That's all I ask. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his expression hardening instantly. I need to take this. Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. Thomas will come to escort you. He was gone before I could say anything else, the door closing quietly behind him. I sank into one of the plush chairs by the window, my mind reeling. This man who spoke of violence and control with equal ease, who had orchestrated my entire future without my consent, was asking me to try. The audacity of it should have made me furious. But underneath the anger was something else, something I didn't want to examine too closely. Curiosity. What would it be like to have Damian Blackwood's loyalty in return? His protection? His attention? The thoughts felt like betrayal of myself, of every principle I held. Yet they persisted, whispering in the back of my mind. True to his word, Thomas appeared 30 minutes later to escort me downstairs. The dining room was another exercise in refined wealth, a long table that could seat 20, though only 2 places were set at one end. Crystal gleamed under the chandelier's light. The table was laden with more food than 2 people could possibly eat. Damian was already there, standing by his chair. He pulled out the seat beside his. Not across from him, but next to him. Close. I prefer to have dinner companions I can actually converse with, he said, noting my hesitation. Not shout across 10 feet of mahogany. I sat, acutely aware of his proximity, the breadth of his shoulders, the way his hands moved with careful precision as he poured wine for himself, water for me. I wasn't sure if you drank, he said, catching my glance at his glass. But, given your condition. My condition? I cut him off. The stress you're under. Wine might help you relax, but I thought water was safer. It was a small thing, that consideration, but it surprised me nonetheless. Dinner was surprisingly easy. Damian asked questions about my life, what I'd studied in my brief stint at community college before financial reality forced me to drop out, what books I liked, whether I'd traveled at all. He listened with genuine interest, not the polite attention of someone making small talk. I found myself relaxing fractionally, drawn into the conversation despite my best intentions. "What about you?" I asked finally. "How does someone become this?" I gestured at the opulent room. His smile was sardonic. "You mean, how does someone become a crime lord?" I meant successful, but yes, that too. "I inherited the family business," he said simply. "My father built this empire. I just refined it, expanded it, made it more efficient." "And your family? Where are they?" Something shuddered in his expression. "Dead. Most of them, anyway. My father, my mother, my sister Delilah. Car bomb 11 years ago. I was 19. The casual way he said it, as if discussing the weather, made my chest tighten. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." His voice had gone cold. It made me who I am. Taught me valuable lessons about trust and vulnerability. The message was clear. Those were weaknesses he couldn't afford. We finished dinner in silence, the easy rapport shattered by the reminder of the violence that underscored everything about his life. Our life, now. As Thomas cleared the plates, Damien stood. "I have work to finish tonight. Feel free to explore the house, the gardens. Just don't go beyond the gates." "My cage has nice boundaries," I said before I could stop myself. He paused, looking down at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Get some rest, Diana. Tomorrow is going to be a long day." I watched him leave, then made my way back upstairs to the suite that was mine but not mine. Beautiful, but confining. Sleep came eventually, fitful and full of dreams. Walking down an endless aisle, a veil so heavy I couldn't lift my head, and slate-gray eyes watching me from the shadows. Tomorrow I would explore this prison. Saturday I would walk into it willingly, for lack of any better choice. I woke to sunlight streaming through windows I'd forgotten to cover. For one disoriented moment, I couldn't remember where I was. The bed was too soft, the room too large, everything too quiet. Then memory crashed back. Damien's estate, my wedding day. My stomach lurched. A soft knock preceded Elena's entrance. She carried a breakfast tray, fresh fruit, pastries, coffee that smelled divine. "Good morning, Miss Carter. I hope you slept well." "Well enough," I lied. "Excellent. We have a full schedule. Hair and makeup begin in 2 hours, then you'll dress. The ceremony starts at 4 this afternoon." 4, less than 8 hours until I became Mrs. Damien Blackwood. The morning passed in a blur of activity. Elena orchestrated everything with military precision. 2 women arrived to handle my hair and makeup, transforming me into a polished version of myself I barely recognized. My dark hair was swept up in an elegant style, a few curls left loose to frame my face. The makeup was subtle, but skillful, emphasizing my green eyes, making me look older, more sophisticated. "Beautiful," one of the women murmured, stepping back to admire her work. I stared at my reflection. She was right. I looked beautiful. But the woman in the mirror wasn't me. She was someone else. Someone who belonged in Damien's world of wealth and violence. The wedding dress came next. Madame Rousseau herself had come to ensure the fit was perfect, fussing over every detail as her assistants helped me into the gown. The silk whispered against my skin, cool and luxurious. The bodice hugged my frame perfectly, the skirt flowing in elegant lines. Finally, the veil. Madame Rousseau and her team attached it carefully, the heavy fabric falling around me like a shroud. It was beautiful, intricate, suffocating. "The veil will remain down until Mr. Blackwood lifts it," Elena instructed. "Remember, you'll walk down the aisle with your face covered. Don't touch it. Don't adjust it. Just walk. Just walk into your new life. Just walk into captivity. Just walk toward a future you never chose." At 3:30, Thomas knocked on the door. "Miss Carter, it's It's time. The chapel was on the estate's western side, a small stone building that looked centuries old, though I suspected Damien had simply built it to look that way. Inside, sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting colored shadows across wooden pews. The pews held maybe 30 people, men in expensive suits, a few women in designer dresses, all watching with carefully neutral expressions as I appeared in the doorway. No one I knew, no friends, just witnesses to Damien's display of power. And at the altar, Damien himself, devastating in a charcoal suit that fit him like it was sculpted to his frame. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his expression unreadable. But his eyes, those slate-gray eyes, tracked my every movement with predatory focus. The music began. Wagner's bridal chorus, traditional and inexorable. I walked. Each step felt like moving through water, heavy and slow. The veil obscured my vision, reducing everything to muted shapes and colors. I could make out Damien's silhouette waiting for me, solid and immovable. Halfway down the aisle, I felt it, a slight tug on my shoulder. The veil had caught on something, a buckle on my dress, a clip I hadn't noticed. Before I could react, before Elena or anyone could help, the veil slipped. It happened in slow motion. The heavy fabric sliding forward, the combs loosening, the whole elaborate construction falling away from my head. My face was exposed too early. I stood there in the center of the aisle, veil pooling at my feet, my face bare for everyone to see. But I wasn't looking at the witnesses, or Elena rushing forward, or Madame Rousseau's horrified expression. I was looking at Damien, and Damien was staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. All the color had drained from his face. His eyes were wide, fixed on me with an intensity that went beyond shock into something like terror. His hands gripped the altar's edge so hard his knuckles went white. "Delilah," he breathed, the word barely audible but carrying through the sudden silence like a gunshot. Delilah, his dead sister, the one who died 11 years ago in the car bomb that killed his parents. "No," he said, louder now, taking a step back. "No, this can't." The priest looked confused. The witnesses murmured among themselves, and I stood frozen, veil at my feet, watching Damien Blackwood, the most powerful, controlled man I'd ever met, come completely undone. Elena reached me, trying to reattach the veil, but I barely noticed. All my attention was on Damien, as he stared at me with something that looked like anguish mixed with disbelief. "Mr. Blackwood?" the priest ventured. "Shall we proceed?" Damien didn't answer. He moved down the aisle toward me, each step measured and deliberate, his eyes never leaving my face. When he reached me, he stood so close I could feel the heat radiating off him. "Who are you?" His voice was raw. "Who are you really?" "Diana Carter," I whispered. "You know who I am." "No." He reached out, his hand hovering near my face but not touching, as if afraid I might disappear. "You look exactly like her." "Exactly. That's not possible. It's not." "Sir, perhaps we should postpone," Elena said quietly. "Give you time to—" "No." Damien's voice hardened, control snapping back into place though his face remained pale. "No, we're proceeding. Now." He took my arm, not gently, but not violently either, and led me the rest of the way to the altar. The witnesses had gone silent, watching this drama unfold with obvious fascination. The ceremony was a blur. I spoke the words when prompted, heard Damien do the same, his voice steady, but his hand shaking slightly when he slipped the ring onto my finger, a simple platinum band set with a single diamond. "You may kiss the bride," the priest intoned. Damien lifted the veil, properly this time, and looked at me with eyes full of questions I didn't understand. When he kissed me, it was brief, almost perfunctory, but his hand at my waist trembled. Then we were walking back down the aisle, married, while whispers followed in our wake. Diana Blackwood, Mrs. Damien Blackwood. A new person with a new name and a husband who looked at her like she was a resurrection instead of a bride. The reception was held in the estate's grand ballroom, another display of Damien's wealth and taste. Crystal chandeliers, live orchestra, champagne flowing freely. I stood beside Damien, accepting congratulations from people whose names I instantly forgot, all while he kept one hand possessively at the small of my back. He'd recovered his composure on the surface, but I felt the tension in his frame, saw how his eyes kept returning to my face as if confirming I was real. When we finally had a moment alone, or as alone as we could be in a room full of people, I turned to him. "Who was she?" I asked quietly. "Delilah, tell me about her." His jaw tightened. "Not here." "Then where? When?" He leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "After this circus ends, we need to talk. Privately." The reception dragged on for hours. I smiled until my face ached, danced with Damien to songs I didn't know, cut a cake I didn't want. All the traditional rituals, empty and hollow. Finally, mercifully, it ended. Thomas informed us that our suite was ready. Apparently Damien had prepared the master bedroom as our shared space, though I'd been half hoping he'd insist I keep my own room. The master bedroom was stunning, decorated in shades of cream and charcoal, with French doors leading to a private terrace. The bed was enormous, dominating the space. Damien closed the door behind us, then immediately loosened his tie, running a hand through his hair. The controlled facade cracked, revealing raw emotion underneath. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the sitting area by the fireplace. "Please." I settled into an armchair, still wearing the wedding dress. Damien poured himself a drink, whiskey, neat, and stood by the fireplace, the flames casting shadows across his features. "Delilah was my twin sister," he began without preamble. "Identical to me in ways that went beyond appearance. We understood each other completely. When our parents were killed, she was in the car with them. The bomb was meant for my father, but it took all three of them." His voice remained steady, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the glass. "I'm sorry," I said softly, "but I don't understand what she has to do with me." He turned, pinning me with that intense gaze. "When your veil fell, when I saw your face clearly for the first time." He paused, struggling with words. "You look exactly like her. Not similar. Not reminiscent. Exactly. As if she never died. As if she'd aged 11 years and was standing in front of me." My blood ran cold. "That's impossible. I've never..." "I know. Logically, I know you're not Delilah. But the resemblance..." He moved closer, kneeling so we were at eye level. "Let me see. Really see." He studied my face with clinical intensity, cataloging every feature. "The shape of your eyes, the way your mouth curves. The small scar on your left eyebrow, Delilah had the same one, from falling off a bike when we were 7. Even your bone structure, the way you tilt your head when you're thinking." "It's coincidence," I said, but my voice wavered, because what were the odds? What were the chances I'd end up forced into marriage with a man whose dead sister I apparently resembled exactly? "I don't believe in coincidence," Damien said flatly. "Someone put you in my path. Someone who knew exactly what your face would do to me." He stood abruptly, rage flooding his features. "Your brother, Dylan. Did he know? Is that why?" "No." I stood as well. "Dylan's an idiot, but he's not that calculating. He stole from you out of desperation and stupidity, not as part of some elaborate scheme." Damien wasn't convinced. "Then who? Who sent you into my life?" "Maybe no one," I said desperately. "Maybe it really is just a terrible coincidence. Maybe..." There are no coincidences in my world. His voice rose. Then he visibly controlled himself, jaw clenching. I'm sorry. This isn't your fault. But I need to know the truth. About your family. About where you came from. I sank back into the chair, exhaustion washing over me. I don't know much. My parents died when I was 19. Car accident, supposedly. But I was always told I was adopted. I never knew my birth parents. Damien went very still. Adopted. My parents, the Carters, they were good people. They gave me a wonderful childhood. But yes, I was adopted as an infant. I never looked into it because I didn't care. The Carters were my real family. Do you have any documentation? Adoption papers? I shook my head. They were lost in a fire when I was 15. The Carters never thought to get copies. Damien was already pulling out his phone, typing rapidly. I'll have my people investigate. Every adoption in Illinois around the time you were born, every connection, every paper trail. If someone placed you with the Carters deliberately, we'll find out. And then what? I asked tiredly. What does it change? He looked at me, something raw and vulnerable in his expression. Everything. Don't you see? If you were put in my path deliberately, if your resemblance to Delilah is intentional, then our marriage wasn't about your brother's theft. It was about something much bigger. The investigation took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of living in Damien's house as his wife, sleeping in the same bed but careful not to touch, learning to navigate the dangerous world he inhabited. 3 weeks of Damien looking at me with a mixture of longing and suspicion, of watching him war with himself every time he saw my face. And then his men found something. I was in the library when Damien came to find me, his expression grim. We need to talk. Now. He led me to his private office, shut the door, and spread papers across his desk. Your birth certificate, the real one. My hand shook as I picked it up. The parents listed weren't the Carters. Mother, Elena Rossini. Father, Marco DeLuca. I don't understand, I whispered. Who are they? Elena Rossini was Delilah's nanny, Damien said, his voice tight with controlled rage. She was with our family for years. Marco DeLuca. He paused. Marco DeLuca was the man who ordered the hit on my family. The man who killed my parents and Delilah. The room spun. That's not possible. Why would... Because you weren't supposed to exist, Damien cut me off. Elena and Marco had an affair. When she got pregnant, Marco's wife, a woman far more powerful and dangerous than him, would have killed them both. So Elena arranged for the baby, you, to be adopted out, to disappear. But the resemblance to Delilah, that's the truly sick part. Damien's voice was raw. Marco DeLuca is my uncle, my father's brother. Elena was, my mother's sister. You, Diana. He met my eyes. You're my cousin, which is why you look like Delilah. You share our bloodline. I couldn't breathe. So when Dylan stole from you, someone made sure he stole from me. Someone who knew about you, knew what your face would do to me, and engineered circumstances to force us together. His fist slammed on the desk. This whole thing was orchestrated. Our marriage, your choice to stay, all of it. By who? He pulled out another photo, an older woman with steel gray hair and cold eyes. Marco's wife, Lucia DeLuca. She's been trying to destroy my family for decades. This was her masterpiece. Putting you, the living image of my dead sister, the daughter of my family's greatest enemy, in my bed. Waiting for me to find out the truth and tear myself apart over it. I stood on shaking legs, backing away. So what now? You have your revenge? You married your enemy's daughter, just like they wanted? No. Damien moved around the desk, his expression fierce. No, because here's what Lucia didn't account for. what she couldn't have predicted. He reached for my hand, pulling me close despite my resistance. In these 3 weeks, I've come to care for you. The real you, not Delilah's ghost. Your stubbornness, your refusal to be crushed by circumstances, the way you look at me like you're not sure if I'm human or monster. He cupped my face with surprising gentleness. They wanted to destroy me with you. Instead, they gave me the first real thing I've felt since Delilah died. Tears streaked down my face. How can you care for me? I'm the daughter of the man who murdered your family. You're Diana Carter, he said firmly. You're the woman who walked down that aisle with your head high, who's faced every impossible situation with courage, who made me feel something other than emptiness for the first time in 11 years. Whatever blood runs in your veins, it doesn't define you. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered. Be married to you, knowing. Then don't. He released me, stepping back. I'll have the marriage annulled. I'll protect you from Lucia. Set you up somewhere safe, anywhere you want. You don't have to stay. For the first time, it was a real choice. He was giving me freedom, the one thing he'd never offered before. I looked at him, this complicated, dangerous man who'd forced me into marriage, but now stood before me offering release, who looked at me like I was precious despite who my father was, who'd shown me kindness even when he didn't have to. I need time, I said finally, to think, to understand all of this. He nodded. Take all the time you need. I stood on the terrace overlooking Damien's, our estate gardens, watching the sun set over Chicago. In my hand was a glass of wine, the first I'd allowed myself in months. A year had passed since that revelation in Damien's office. A year of choosing, every day, to stay. To build something real from the forced foundation we'd started with. It hadn't been easy. Learning the truth about my parentage, confronting the reality that I was the daughter of a monster, had nearly broken me. But Damien had been there through all of it. Patient, understanding, never pushing, just offering quiet support until I found my footing again. We'd dealt with Lucia DeLuca together. Not with violence, though that was Damien's first instinct, but by systematically dismantling her power base until she had nothing left. Her plan to destroy us had instead united us against a common enemy, arms wrapped around my waist from behind. I leaned back into Damien's embrace, no longer flinching from his touch. Penny for your thoughts? He murmured against my hair. Just thinking about how far we've come, how different things are. Are you happy? The vulnerability in his voice still surprised me sometimes. Damien Blackwood, powerful and feared, worried about my happiness. I turned in his arms, meeting those slate-gray eyes that no longer frightened me. I am. Are you? More than I ever thought possible. He kissed me, gentle and reverent. When we separated, he added, I never thanked you properly. For what? For choosing to stay. For choosing me, despite everything. For seeing past the monster to something worth loving. I touched his face, feeling the slight stubble under my palm. You're not a monster, Damien. You're just a man trying to survive in a dangerous world. We both are. Surviving, he echoed. Yes, but with you, I'm finally living. As the last light faded from the sky, I thought about that moment when the veil fell, when Damien first saw my face and everything changed. We'd both been prisoners then. Me literally. Him to his grief and loneliness. Now we were free. Free to choose each other every day. Free to build a future that wasn't dictated